Chair Devine, you are live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the July 21st Glendale Housing Authority meeting being called to order at approximately 3:46. Sorry we're a little late. We had a special council meeting previously, so thank you for tuning in at this time or for waiting around for us. For all of you, due to the evolving situation with the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and health recommendations from the LA County Health Department, Glendale Housing Authority meeting will be available to the public electronically. Due to social distancing requirements, the public will not be able to attend the meeting, but you are encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of your homes to practice social distancing. The meeting can be viewed on local cable. That would be Charter Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Streaming online at glendaleca.gov/government/public meeting portal. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during the Glendale Housing Authority meeting. And I guarantee you, those that are here, this is a very exciting day for us. We have roll call, please, Mr. Jemian.
Authority member Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Farazian.
Here.
Chair Devine.
Here. Next, please.
The agenda for the July 21st, 2020 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And the next item?
4 would be approval of minutes, 4A minutes of the regular Housing Authority meeting of June 30th, 2020 and July 7th, 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Second, hearing no objections, the minutes stand approved as submitted. And what's next, please?
Next would be number 5, oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to the staff through the Executive Director for investigation and report. Chair Devine, we do not have any phone calls.
All righty, thank you so much. So let's get on with our next item, please.
6 would be business agenda. 6A, community development regarding authorization to issue a request for proposals for an affordable housing development at 515 Pioneer Drive. A1, Housing Authority motion directing staff to issue a request for proposal to solicit developers to partner with the Housing Authority to develop 515 Pioneer Drive with newly constructed affordable housing for seniors and families.
Thank you. And Ms. Spears, who is presenting this item?
Excuse me, Mr. Fortney will be presenting this item, Chair Devine. And as you stated, an exciting afternoon for us in terms of the Housing Authority giving us direction to move forward with the purchase and acquisition of the properties that will be discussed today, the one on Pioneer and your next item, which is located on East Broadway. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Fortney to take you through the initial presentation on 515 Pioneer Drive and get any feedback and direction that the the Housing Authority will have on this item.
All right, thank
Mr.
you.
Fortney.
Thank you, Mr. Fortney.
All right, thank you very much. Housing Authority Chair Devine, Housing Authority Board members, Mike Fortney, Principal Housing Project Manager for the city. Our first item is requesting authorization to issue a request for proposals for 515 Pioneer Drive. Up on the screen now is a site map showing where the site is. It's just immediately south of the 134 freeway, immediately west of Pacific Avenue. And we wanted to point out that there's a pedestrian tunnel. It's a linkage connecting the site with Fremont Park. So the arrow's pointing there. We just thought that that's important to point out. It's something we'd like to see addressed in the RFP. The site itself is probably the biggest, I think it's the biggest piece of land the Housing Authority has acquired to date. 2.8 acres, or almost 122,000 square feet. When we acquired the property from AT&T, and today still, it's zoned R3050, which is a moderate density residential. The purchase price, $13.1 million, it's actually $13 million and change. That was $12.2 million for the land itself, an additional $800,000 and change for the furniture, fixtures, equipment. What we're looking to do here is develop both family and senior affordable housing. And staff's thought is that this site could support somewhere between 270 and 300 units. And what happening?
You move it?
Oh, there, now it's moving. So what we did to illustrate to the Housing Authority, as well as to help guide developers that will respond to the RFP. Urban design team internally did some site planning for the site. So we wanted to walk through 3 different concepts, and they're based on, we don't know who's going to respond to the RFP and what their capacity will be. Most of the larger affordable housing projects that we have developed in the last 10, 15 years have come through the 9% Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program. But there are entities out there that may respond to the RFP that have the capacity to issue bonds in excess of $130, $140 million and potentially develop the site all at once. So we thought that the site being developed all at once, or whether it's phased in 2 phases or even in 3 phases, that sort of thing kind of drove how the design of the project may look like. So we just wanted to present to the Housing Authority how that may look. So the first concept that you're looking at here, this is potentially how a project could look if it were developed in a single phase. I just caution, there are very few entities out there that I'm aware of, staff's aware of, that could do a project of this size in a single phase. But Urban Design looked at it and said, yeah, we 305 roughly units with a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units could fit on this site and still allow for some open space. All of that improvement then being placed on a single level subterranean structure of about 280 parking stalls. The next slide is concept 1, but kind of a bird's eye view of how it might look, as well as how it would fit in the surrounding area. It's a very large building, 305 units. It's generally limited to 4 stories facing Pioneer, and then goes up to 5 stories behind that. The next slide, concept 2, staff thinks it's probably more likely that we're going to see something along these lines, where you are going to have developers proposing to develop the site using 9% affordable housing tax credits, but there simply isn't the capacity to build 270 units in a single phase using the 9% affordable housing tax credits. So what we thought is probably the maximum you could get in a single phase of affordable housing tax credits might be 135 units. So Urban Design took that and they developed a site plan with 2 roughly 135 unit buildings. One of the buildings would accommodate seniors and would be roughly 90% 1 bedroom and 10% 2 bedroom, very similar to the unit mix we have at Vista Grande Court, which we just celebrated the grand opening of a few months back. And the other would be a family project, including 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. It could include studios. And the idea would be that would fit the 9% criteria for the unit mix there. And I just wanted to hesitate or pause for a moment to say the reason we wanted to design that first phase, this middle building, with seniors in mind, is because we think through the process we can get the project entitled in the July 21 tax credit application round. So that's what we'd be shooting for. Southern California kind of has first bite of the apple in terms of getting senior tax credits in the July round. So we thought out of the gate it would be, just for strategic purposes, it would be good to go after a senior project in the first phase. And then that could be followed up with a second phase the following year when we apply for additional tax credits. So this next slide is concept 2, showing it, the bird's eye view. What we also did was, it's our opinion that probably 135 units is the most we can get out of a single tax credit round. And on the first concept, you had seen a total of 305 units. That's because it wouldn't be subject necessarily to 9% tax credits. So what we thought was, if we're really going to maximize the site, perhaps we can do 2 phases of 9% affordable tax credits, and we're probably looking at about 135 units max each. How else can we maximize the number of units that we can put on the property, still be responsible for around, with the surrounding neighborhood, and throw in a different type of product instead of just these apartment rental units? And so the thought came about perhaps for sale townhomes, and the staff report mentions perhaps San Gabriel Valley Habitat for Humanity, whom we've partnered with 9 times in the past, could potentially build outside the tax credit process 12 or maybe even 18 units. So in concept 2 and in concept 3, you're seeing these townhomes on the south and west corners. And it's also either a 2 or 3 story style that it probably fits into the neighborhood a little bit better, where we do have a number of single family homes. So there's the planning side of it too, but then on the economic side, we wanted to just maximize the lot and try to get as many units as we can, knowing that we're limited to the number of units we can get through the 9% program. So that's what you're seeing there on concept 2. And then finally on concept 3, we just took the idea a little bit further, and we said, okay, this could potentially what we'd be looking at if a developer responded to us and said, we could build out the entire project, but it would take 3 rounds of 9% affordable tax credits of, say, 90 to maybe 100 units. Again, all of this would be built above a subterranean structure. And again, on concept 3, we thought, even in this example, we could potentially have an agreement with San Gabriel Valley Habitat for Humanity or some other entity to build maybe 12 to 18 units on the south and west corner. It's kind of a buffer between that larger multifamily 4 or 5 story structure and then the neighborhood surrounding it. So that's what you're seeing in concept 3. 3 buildings versus 2 buildings, and of course concept 1 large building. But then I just wanted to pause there and make it clear that we're asking to issue a request for proposals. So I wanted to just kind of talk about that a little bit. What we've done in the past in developer solicitation is either issue a request for proposals or we issue a request for qualifications. The distinction is an RFP is very appropriate when you're soliciting a development proposal where there's a lot of unknowns. The conceptual design, possibly the target population or income ranges, other specifics that just aren't fully vetted. In this particular case, in Pioneer, we don't know how developers could respond. We may not get a single developer that says that they can develop the entire site in 1. We may have a number of them that say they can do it in 2, others in 3. We just don't know. And as you can see from the aerial and the bird's eye, you can see that the phasing of the project and how it's constructed over a single phase versus 3 phases really changes the look and concept. So there's enough unknowns about Pioneer that we think it's appropriate to issue a request for proposals. So that's what we're asking the Housing Authority to do here. We're not asking the Housing Authority to sign off on concept 1 or 2 or 3. Those are, again, just to illustrate what the project may look like once we get submittals back from the development community, once the RFP is submitted. So staff's recommendation is to allow us to issue that RFP. I have it on or about July 29th. We think without any changes to the RFP or with minimal changes, it could actually go out Thursday of this week, give the developers even more time to respond. But generally 90 days for developers to respond. That would give them a deadline of November 2nd of this year to respond to us. And we're asking for conceptual design from these developers. And so that's why we're giving them 90 days to respond. It takes time to put a package like that together. So once the deadline of November 2nd passes, staff will then analyze the proposals, and we have a team that will be assembled, including housing, urban design, planning, and if appropriate, even somebody from Parks to evaluate the senior program for a project. We'll have together, and it's our commitment to try to get you a recommendation by January 21. And I've been looking a little bit more and more about the schedule and how that might fall. And we actually believe we could bring you a recommendation just before, or in the week of December 20th. So we would really aim to try to get you a recommendation in December of this year, but at the latest it would fall to January of 21. And the reason why we would like to get it done and get it done so quickly is we do want the project to be entitled and ready for the July 21 tax credit round. Now, that's assuming this is going to be a 9% affordable housing tax credit. I think it's a good chance that it will, but it may not. But we do want to be ready to go and give the developer at minimum five months, if not 6 months, to get the project fully developed or fully entitled and ready for that July tax credit round. If it does go the 9% affordable route, and that would be for phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 would have to apply for subsequent 9% affordable tax credit rounds. But we anticipate if we are awarded July 21 tax credits for phase 1, that project, that portion of the project would be fully delivered, fully leased by December of 23. And prior to that being fully delivered, fully leased, phase 2 and even potentially phase 3 could be in construction. If we were to go with the concept where Habitat or some other group would build the townhomes on the south and west corner, they could potentially break ground basically when the podium was poured once the subterranean structure was done. So there would be a lot of activity going on all at once. We're not looking at 3 years to develop and construct and lease out phase 1 and then move to phase 2 and then move to phase 3. All these things would be happening as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have on the RFP request for Pioneer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fortney. The reason we want to try to get in on that July round is because that is for senior developments, correct?
That's right. Southern California has an advantage in July to take the kind of first bite of the apple and for senior projects. Also, if we don't hit the July 21 tax credit round, the next tax credit round isn't until March of 2022. So it would be 8 months before we could apply for tax credits again.
It's a delay. And my second question is concerning Habitat for Humanity. And have you had discussions with them? Would they be interested?
Yeah, without getting too far ahead of the City Council and the Housing
Yes,
Authority,
right.
I've had preliminary discussions with Habitat for Humanity, San Gabriel Valley, whom we've done 9 deals with before. Yes, they're absolutely very interested in doing
Hold
a
on.
project like this.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm not sure.
A question.
Maybe the city attorney can correct me, but I'm not sure it's at all proper at this point to be talking about a developer when we're ready to go out on an RFP process. I mean, I know Habitat, I know what they do, but it's certainly, I'm very uneasy about, saying, wouldn't it be great if Habitat did it? Oh, by the way, anyone else who's interested, you guys can apply too. But am I being overly sensitive in that, Mr. City Attorney, when we're talking about a potential developer of this site at this point?
We were talking about RFPing the remaining part?
We're strictly talking about the 12 to 18 units that could be built
Right.
in addition to the 270.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair and members of the Housing Authority, the proposal before you is on the RFP for the rental units. The suggestion from staff is to discuss the potential for having a separate but related component for sale housing. And so I think that's what Mr. Fortney was referring to. So that's kind of, that was a piece of it. But Your concerns are understood, and again, and I think as Mr. Fortney noted, obviously we want to get direction from the Housing Authority, and we would move forward on any sort of substantive discussion before doing so. And I would just add, by the way, Mr. Mayor, members of council and the Housing Authority, we, in addition to the provisions in the RFP that are before you, kind of in line with what we've been doing on prior RFPs in other arenas, we've added a provision regarding contact between applicants and the council, the Housing Authority, and staff, so that the process follows the process and there's no outside communication as part of that process.
Okay, so let's take other, Mr. Najarian, do you want to continue with comments or questions?
I will continue. I think we're very fortunate that we were able to come to terms with AT&T for this project. I would like to get affordable housing as we can on that site. I guess rendering number one, the concept number one, the 305, it's one building. I'm leaning towards that just because we've always been playing catch up with affordable housing units, and this may be the best and most effective way to help create as much downtown as we can, which is separate. I mean, not downtown, but near the downtown area. I won't share that same comment on the next development that's coming before us, but for this one, I don't have a problem with just getting as much as we can with one building, get all the efficiencies in construction and efficiencies of management that one building would give you.
Okay, thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much. Mr. Kasakian, Mr.
Madam
Botman?
Chair, this is Raj.
Okay, Mayor?
Yes, I would like to see I like the concept one, and I want to see as many units as possible to have there, and also I want to make sure, as I said before, the units to be as small as possible, to have more units, because as I said, I'm sure here they're gonna have swimming pool and they're gonna have pool room and other amenities and other, what they call they're gonna have lots of, am I right, Mr. Courtney? Inside the building, inside this complex will be gathering room and other
Office room.
So there are community amenities. We've never built a swimming pool for any of our affordable housing projects in the city of Glendale, but community rooms, labs, computer labs, things like that. Yeah, those are pretty standard.
No, I mean that people, they can spend their time, lots of time, the elderly, at least they can spend their time in there, right?
That's right.
So they are not going to spend their time inside their room. So that's why I'm offering or asking to create as many units as possible, as a smaller and more units to accommodate that 6,800 people who are still online or waiting one day to see that they have a unit that it's more affordable for them. As this will be a brand new building, and we can accommodate more people in this building. So that's why I want the concept one, and I want to make sure that you're gonna have units, whether it's studio or whatever you call it, with 500 square foot of space. Not larger like 600 and 800, but to have smaller units as much as possible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think that we have to keep in mind that I think Mr. Fortney said we're not to actually choose one of the projects. That's really going to be up to whoever achieves the reward for their proposal. Our question is, are we in favor of a request for proposals as opposed to a request for projects, or not projects, but qualifications? So, Mr. Brotman, are you ready?
Yeah, so it's very exciting. I think the strategy that Mr. Fortney laid out makes sense to me. So going ahead with an RFP and seeing whether we can get it done all at once or in phases. So all that looks good. I'm happy with it. I went over there today and I remember, I kind of just something to think about as we move down this path, because we're ultimately going to have a lot of people in that location. And that, as you know, that sidewalk down Pacific is really very, very narrow and not something that's conducive to walking. And I was just kind of thinking, like, where are the closest amenities, where are the closest retail outlets for people that would be living there? They're all the way down by, I think, Pacific and Broadway. And it's a pretty hairy walk down there. But anyway, so as we look at this, maybe we could put some thought into how do we make that a little bit more walkable and maybe encourage some more retail in the area, so that people have safe access to the things they might need day to day.
Thank you, Ms. Brotman. Mr. Kasakian.
Yes, thank you. I think that obviously there's a great need for affordable housing and we need it like yesterday. So the sooner we can have as many units built as possible, the better. I think that the proposal that I think Habitat for Humanity does great work. First of all, I've worked on their projects, I've volunteered for them. Ultimately though, I don't want to have to wait for them to be able to provide as much units as possible. I think the first option was the one that maximized and had one large structure would be something that I would support and I'd like to see. Mainly, and I do support the idea of smaller units, especially if it's for senior housing. And I should say, with the caveat that they have all the amenities like they have at some of the other great projects that have been built so far. Those are my only thoughts on this right now. And I do want to ask again, it's public information, right? How much we paid for this property right now?
It is.
What was it again? Can staff remind me?
It is. Mm-hmm. Oh, the total, including F&E, fixtures, furniture, and equipment, was just over $13 million.
13 million for the property right now? The Pioneer parcel, right?
That's exactly right.
Just out of curiosity, how long had it been on the market before we purchased it?
It was on and off the market a couple of times. AT&T, if memory serves me, was asking north of 15 million at one point. Part of that, they were assuming that the South Glendale Community Plan would, through that process, the property may be upzoned. So they were asking quite a bit more than what we settled at originally, but it was off the market at least twice before we approached them.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mayor.
I just want to, apparently I'm hearing that my colleagues and myself, we are in favor of the concept one. I want to recommend that staff does not spend time on other concepts, because these are issues that will take time, and so as soon as they can to get on concept one and work on that concept and only on that concept.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that we want, and I agree with them, we want as many units in this development as we can get. I think the design will dictate the number of units. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Mr. Fortney?
Yes, design will, and I have to echo it again. We're not asking for a selection of concept 1, 2, or 3. We are issuing an RFP. It'll be up to the development community to submit proposals to the authority, we wanted to show you concepts 1, 2, and 3 to visually give you an idea what those proposals may look like. It is entirely possible that we do not get a single development entity that proposes to be able to build the project in a single phase. We may get one, we may get two. I may be surprised if we get more than two, but it's entirely possible we don't get a single one. So again, we're not asking that the housing authority choose between concept 1, 2, or 3. It is the development community that's going to respond to the RFP and tell us what they can build. It's noted, and it can be put into the RFP that the housing authority's desire is to have the largest number of units that is feasible for the site. But staff is going to evaluate that, and we'll come back with a recommendation. We don't want to look, and we're not going to recommend a pie-in-the-sky proposal from a developer who says they can build 400 units, and then they cannot back that up and say, yeah, we can actually build those units. Or if they come back and say, we can build north of 300 units, but we're going to have to target moderate income households in order to get a higher perm loan. There's all kinds of options, there's all kinds of variables involved in these things. So we're going to bring those back to you. And the RFP can absolutely say, we very much encourage a large number of units. Staff thinks 270 units, potentially 300 units. Developers, if you think you can build more, great, propose that to us. But you need to be able to support and prove that, or substantially convince that you are going to be able to make that a financially feasible project. And all of these things are going to be coming back to you in preferably November or December, at the latest January of next year. And all of those things will be brought to you.
Okay, so what we're asking for today, from
Madam
all of
Chair.
you. Yes,
Madam Chair.
Mayor?
Excuse me. I mean, we
Go ahead,
said we
Mayor.
want this concept 1. If you're going to spend time on concept 2 and concept 3, and you're going to go to developers to tell them it needs time, time will be wasted. We don't have time. We want this to be built as soon as possible. Concept 2 and 3, when you mix it with concept 1, I think that will be the wrong direction.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
Mr.
Mr. Lansing, could you put your mic on, please?
It is.
Microphone?
I'm not talking loud enough, I
There
guess.
you go, there you go.
We're not going to do any more work on concept 1, 2, or 3. They are merely illustrative. We made certain assumptions. Let's just look at concept 1. We made certain assumptions that you would only build one level of parking. That in itself is going to cap the number of units that you can put on. A developer may say, I can make this work with 2 levels of parking, and I can put more units on the site, more than the staff thought in concept 1. We want the development community to tell us that. We want us to tell them that you can only build 250. You can't build anymore. Or you could build 350, or you can build 310, given these parameters. And then we'll bring all that back to the housing authority. But we don't want to tell them we're shooting for 300 units.
What you're talking about is different than what I am saying. On concept 3, you have habitat for humanity.
I think that if I may,
That's not
Mayor?
our concern.
if I may,
We
Mr.
don't want to spend time on it.
Mr. Mayor, I think if that's the direction, if you don't want to have the homeownership component, then that should be the housing authority's direction. I think the problem with, as Mr. Lansfame was trying to explain, we don't know exactly which of these concepts will work from the private sector. That's why they're putting out there as examples, as illustrative of what you might be able to see out there. So if the council has, if the housing authority has specific thoughts on the homeownership component and doesn't want that to be part of it, that's fine. Give us that direction. But we can't say, we don't even know that the concept 1 is financeable because it's not clear that can be built in one phase. And you're certainly going to shrink down the number of developers that can probably pull that off. So that's why let's put these out as options and see what comes back to the developer community.
I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that. What I'm trying to say, I'm not talking about how many units, how much parking, how many levels of parking. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you bring concept tree to a developer, so they think that if based on that to come forward and offer something is acceptable. We said we don't want Habitat for Humanity units. We just want
Understood.
this building to be such that will accommodate the public.
Right. And
Our residents of Glendale, these units will not be for sale, will not be for anything. We don't want to get involved with Habitat for Humanity on this project. I have such a respect for what they are doing. But at this time, that's not our point.
no, we understand
But you
that.
go to a contractor or developer, so they will come up and spend time on it, because I worked on these things. If they come to me, an engineer, and they say, we have these 3 concepts, rather than telling me, we want only rental units
And I
with
think,
parking,
if
and
I may,
that's
if I
it.
may, Mr. Mayor, I think the disconnect here is, concepts 2 or 3 don't necessarily have to have that home ownership component to it. If you don't want that, that's fine. Again, these are illustrative. We're not telling the applicants you have to submit these particular ones. You say, let us see what you want, and these are the concepts. If it's only concept 1 that goes in the RFP, then that's all you'll get. You say, this is what we want, that's all you'll get, and you probably will shrink down the pool. That's what your staff is saying. So we're saying the same thing, I think, but
They're not
we
the same
want
thing.
to.
I've been involved with projects. If you come with 3 different way of doing it, they're gonna see what's beneficial to them. So maybe it's beneficial to the contractor to have Habitat for Humanity. I don't want them to be going off what we are looking for, a building like concept 1, no others are involved, no Habitat for Humanity or organizations like that to be involved with it. At this time, we don't want that.
May I ask, Mr. Mayor, excuse me, but Mr. Fortney, are these concepts going to be part of the proposal request, or are they just for council?
No, they're both. They are attachments to the request for proposals. Again,
Okay, well-
the conceptual design, we generated those to present to the Housing Authority to give an idea of what we may get back, but also to present to the development community ideas staff had in terms of development concepts, whether it be phased or in a single 1, 2, or 3.
Well, okay, so maybe what we should do, and I'll ask my colleagues if they agree, if we use these concepts just for housing, as you say, as illustrative, and not show them to the development community that might be bringing in proposals, let them come up with their own proposals and see what we get. And I think maybe that will kind of satisfy the mayor's fears that if they see this concept with Habitat, they might, kind of want to do that and not build as many units, or we may not get as many units as we want. Why don't we just let them, the development community, come in with their proposals, just tell them that we want the most units that we can get on the property, with the amenities that have gone with all of our developments, which have been fabulous and wonderful, and go from there. Do I have any agreement from my colleagues on that?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Laura?
Yes, I've been at the site today, actually, on both sides, Broadway and the Pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
The Pioneer site, it's a huge site, starting from Pacific, right behind the gas station, and going through Canal Walk. So I know that we need as much units we need. We need to get as much units we need. But again, I believe, that's to the developer community to decide. then I believe we need to have our recommendations, but in favor of RFP for this project.
Thank you, Laura, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this?
If I could, I think staff is, pursuing a strategy. It makes sense to me that they're putting this out, they're giving some ideas. And let's see what we get back. I don't think there's any downside to showing what we have. And in fact, it's all public anyway. I mean, any smart developer is going to pull up this conversation and see what we're talking about. So I think staff strategy makes sense. Go out and see what the market can do.
Mr. Sakian, you have a comment? I thought you looked like you had a comment. No?
No, I just looked interested.
Okay. All right. How do you feel about, Mr. Najarian, any other comments, council member?
Well, I mean, I see where staff is going, but I think it's, perhaps we should take the city attorney's advice that if we do want to make a statement that would help narrow down the types of options, then we would say that we're not interested in the for sale affordable housing. We're looking for a maximization of the number of units, and that maybe would be a statement. And as Mr. Brotman said, any developer, in fact, there may be some watching now, who's serious councils, forecast of their future decisions very seriously. So.
Then there would, I guess, be no reason, Mr. Fortney, to show them concepts 2 and 3. Because it seems the council is agreeing that we want the optimum number of units on the development project. Am I correct? And if that's where we want to go, then we can look at a motion here.
I'm not, if I could interject, I'm not really saying that. I think the idea of these for sale, owners, the potential for ownership units, I think is interesting. I wouldn't want to disregard that. And when you drive down the street and you see the houses across, there are a lot of single family houses. It's small, and I really kind of like the drawing on the second. What was it? The second example there, which showed those ownership units there, kind of it blends into what's across the street. I don't want to rule that out at all. And I think, we're building a lot of apartments, but, we want to also try to accommodate people that want to, own their place. So I think we just leave it open-ended.
Okay. So let's.
I would like to, excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mayor.
I would like not to leave it open. I just want to maximize the units, the building would maximize. When we were doing this, Sonora and Fifth, we didn't say we do something else. There is a building, low-priced rental units. So that's what we want at this time. We are short of that, 6,800. I have to repeat maybe 100 times that still these people are waiting for it. Every day come and they knock my door and say, okay, what happened? How come I didn't get it? Because I have to say that there is only 66 units and 6,800 people are still there waiting. So we have to maximize the rental units, affordable units, to accommodate these people that they're still waiting for. I just want to make sure that we are doing that.
Madam Chair, if maybe I can make a suggestion to bring this all together. We could take the concepts out. We could make the statement very clear that the Housing Authority is looking for the greatest number of units on the site. And we could ask them to pay attention to the surrounding uses and address them in their design. It doesn't have to be townhouses. That was, again, an idea that we had, but the development community is going to know best what they can build and bring that maximum number to you. If that sounds okay to you, that's how we'll draft the RFP with those kind of general parameters. Give us the most number of units you can and make sure that you're addressing the surrounding community.
But I
Okay,
don't want
that
them,
sounds,
excuse me, Madam Chair.
Does
excuse-
anyone want to make a motion to that effect?
Yes, but I just want to make sure that these developers, they are not gonna, they may think what's best for them too. We have to narrow it to be clear. This is, we want rental units, affordable housing is what we need. It has to say, that's the idea. Otherwise, they will look at what's best for them, not what's best for this city.
And I think we need the
Mr.
clarification.
Lanzafame is laying it out that way, and if there are no other, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we go out for an RFP and we incorporate the concepts just described by Mr. Lanzafame in the communication and description of the type of project the council's looking for.
Okay, do I have a second?
Customizing units, sensitivity to the neighborhood in the design.
I second it.
Second, is there a roll call, please?
Sorry, Member Agajanian.
Yes.
Brotman.
Yes.
Kasakian.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Barazian.
Yes.
Chair Devine.
Yes. And the next item, please? Great, thank you all.
Next item is community development regarding authorization to issue requests for qualifications for affordable housing development at 900 and 920 East Broadway and 117 South Belmont Street. Housing Authority motion directing staff to issue a request for qualifications to solicit developers to partner with the Housing Authority to develop 900 East Broadway with newly constructed affordable housing for families. 2, Housing Authority motion directing staff to issue a request for qualifications to solicit developers to partner with the Housing Authority to perform an adequate reuse and historic preservation of 912, 920 East Broadway and 117 South Belmont Street for the development of affordable housing for seniors.
Thank you. Mr. Fortney, is this yours as well?
That's right, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. Again, Housing Authority Chair, Ms. Devine and Housing Authority Chair members, Mike Forney, Principal Housing Project Manager. So the next item up is the 900 through 920 East Broadway. I have the first slide would be the site map. We have in red 900 East Broadway, and in blue we have highlighted 912 through 920 East Broadway, as well as 117 South Belmont Street. I'll commonly refer to the latter site as 920 East Broadway versus 900 East Broadway. Okay. The slide, there we go. All right. So we acquired both of these properties, 900 and 920 East Broadway, from Tobin World. They owned and operated the entire 1.6 acre campus. We acquired it last fall for a total of $12.1 million. It's really 2.8 acre sites split down the middle by a north-south alley. We would like to maximize the number of units on these two sites, and we are looking at potentially doing 80 units on 900 East Broadway. That's 100 units to the acre, and then we believe 39 units is achievable on the 920 side, which is consists of 3 historic structures. We talked about it a little bit under the Pioneer RFP request. Here, again, we're talking about the difference between a request for proposals versus a request for qualifications. And again, an RFP is appropriate when soliciting development proposal where there's a lot of things that aren't still fully vetted, including the design, income range, things of those sorts. RFQ, though, is more appropriate when the development concept, the target population, income ranges, and all those other specific details of a project, they're pretty well defined. So at that point, what you can do is issue an RFQ versus an RFP and solicit developers that would just respond back to you largely to show their qualifications to develop what your concept is. So what staff is recommending here is that we split the site into 900 East Broadway, that 0.8 acre site, where you don't have any historical structures. You can basically start with a clean slate after you eliminate the single-story CMU building that's on there in the surface parking. And you can build new affordable units on that site. Very, very different concept from what we're looking at on 912, 920 East Broadway and 117 South Belmont, where you're looking at the historic preservation and the adaptive reuse of those historic buildings into affordable units, where again, we think we can get 39 units if in fact we also add an additional building there. And then staff would like to see the opportunity here to vacate the alley that separates the two sites, convert that into a pedestrian paseo that would serve both projects, but also serve the community at large. So I wanted to talk about this now. There's a typo on the slide. My apologies for that. 900 to 200 East Broadway. Should say 900 to 920 East Broadway and Belmont. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the effort that has gone on thus far since we've acquired the site. Staff, rather than turning to our urban design team, we've gone out and we've asked KFA. There we go. We've asked KFA to initially do a fit plan for us. We wanted to know, is 80 units on 900 East Broadway, is that achievable? And if so, can we do families versus just seniors? Because we had talked about potentially targeting 100 units to the acre for the site. And then on 912 through 920 East Broadway, in particular, we're buying we recently acquired the 3 historical buildings, which to my knowledge have never been used for or as residential. So the question for KFA on that one is to develop a fit plan for those buildings to see how many residential units those existing buildings could accommodate. So that was the first thing that KFA looked at. At the same time, we also entered into a contract with Architectural Resources Group, and what their purpose was largely was to study the site's historic significance and study if there's any character-defining features that need to be preserved during the adaptive reuse and the historic preservation. And then also, so they did that. They also prepared a preliminary rehabilitation study that is attached to the RFQ, should it be authorized to be released. And so their next step, ARG, is to kind of slate the path for us, if you will, to get a historic designation on the National Register. The site, 920 East Broadway, those 3 historic buildings, they're currently on the local. But in order to obtain historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits, they'd have to be on the National Register. So part of ARG's scope of work now is to bring us into that application process and see if we cannot get some rehabilitation tax credits for that site. So before I jump into the next slide, so kind of just to loop back, that really demonstrates the differences between the two sites and really why staff would like to separate 900 East Broadway with its RFQ versus 920 East Broadway with a separate RFQ, because there really are 2 different projects, probably on different tracks in terms of the development, and although we do hope to deliver them both at the same time. And there's also the issue of the sources and uses that will ultimately be used to develop the 2 sites. So with that, I wanted to talk a little bit more about 900 East Broadway, and I did want to say too, KFA as well as ARG are available for questions. What you're looking at here is was generated by KFA, and it may be a little bit difficult to read because there's a lot of information on there. But what they've done is they've shown us that we can in fact put 80 new construction family units on the site. What they did was they put together roughly half those units being one bedroom, so 40 one bedroom units at roughly 625 square feet each, and then about 25% of the units being two bedroom at roughly 850 square feet, and an additional 25% of the units at three bedrooms, ranging at about 1,100 square feet on average. And then these numbers, these unit mixes, these are expecting the project to probably be financed with 9% affordable housing tax credit. So the unit mix, this was keeping in mind we wanted to make a project that would be able to apply for the 9% affordable housing tax credits. So that's the unit mix. The unit mix can change. We can increase we could add studios and decrease the number of one bedrooms. We could decrease the size of the ones, twos, and threes based on some discussion we had when we were briefing council, briefing the housing authority, I should say. There was one or two that expressed a desire to potentially have smaller units in exchange for a larger number of units. So we've had conversations, staff has had conversations with KFA. And in fact, that is achievable. We wanted to keep the overall size of the building, roughly what it is now. But in discussing this with KFA, there's a potential to increase that unit number from 80 to potentially 88 units by decreasing the size of some of the units and making some of the one-bedrooms studios. So I did want to put that out there. And that can all be done even with the issuance of an RFQ. We can make some changes to the RFQ before it gets to the street, or if need be, create an addendum later on. So this slide here shows parking. For 80 family units on site, we can serve most of the building with a single level subterranean parking structure, although you can see 25-30% would have to go into a second story. And the parking ratio, we kept it one space per one bedroom and two spaces per two and three bedroom, and that's in line with the density bonus requirement. Here we're showing you floor plans, which we did not have when we briefed you. So this is floor plans for levels 1 and 2. You'll see that there is still additional parking on the first floor. The idea there too is 900 East Broadway would provide parking for 920 East Broadway because there isn't any parking for those historic buildings now. When Tobin World was operating, it was quite an issue, honestly, with the number of staff working at Tobin World and no parking on site. So our acquisition absolutely relieved that. We don't want to then create that problem again by providing 30 some odd residential units on 920 without providing on-site parking. And the only way to really achieve that is if we do it on 900. So that first level floor plan you see, there's still additional surface parking, and much of that would be for 920 East Broadway. In addition to that, there is a large community center, our community room that would serve the community. And then just really floor plans 3 through 5, again, not something you had seen in the briefings. And really these are stacking the units one on top of the other until you get to the 5th floor where we've pulled units off all of the corners, and that's to try to lessen the impact of the building on the surrounding neighborhood. Most of the buildings immediately surrounding this don't exceed 3 stories. So this would be one of the larger buildings in the neighborhood. In fact, the two multifamily buildings immediately behind this building are 3-story buildings. And there's a number of other 3-story buildings too, but I just walked the site again today and I didn't observe anything 4 floors or higher in the immediate vicinity. So this is a bird's eye view from the west looking east of what 900 East Broadway could look like. It's a bird's eye view for a reason. I don't want to give anybody the impression that this project is, the conceptual design is further along than it really is. It's It's probably 20 to 25% at this point. If it were further along, the picture you see now would be zoomed in a bit. There's so many more issues, patios, balconies, materials. Do the floor plans match the windows and the patios and the balconies? And there's no landscape plan that's been developed to this point. So it is pretty preliminary. What staff would like to do, though, now is hire KFA to bring this project through entitlements, a separate landscape architect, which we can solicit bids for as well, and actually bring this project to full entitlements, probably not by the time we pick the developer, but shortly thereafter. The idea being, if we start this process now of getting the project entitled, we can apply for 9% affordable tax credits in the March 2021 tax credit round. If we don't do this now, we cannot get this project entitled by March. There's just no way to do that. So we would like to lead the charge, get the project entitled, go through the process, and have it entitled roughly about when we bring a developer on board or shortly thereafter. And so the project would be fully entitled and would be ready for the March 21 tax credit round, and would not compete against Pioneer, which we anticipate first phase being ready for tax credits in July of 2021. So that's the idea there. And then if I may go on to 900 East Broadway, again, we were asking that a separate RFQ be issued right about the same time. We can probably get that out on the street Friday unless there's some significant changes you'd like to see. Again, we'd like to fully entitle that project, apply for, this is 900, I apologize. So again, just kind of summarizing what I'd said before, we want to apply for the March 21 tax credit round, the 9% affordable tax credits. The only way to get that done is if we fully entitle it beginning after the issuance of this RFQ, not waiting for the developer to come on board. With the award of tax credits, if we were able to get the tax credits in March 21, we are looking at delivering a fully leased project by December 23, maybe fall 23, a couple of months before December, but realistically and to be safe, December 2023. And now, if I may switch over to 920 East Broadway, start off with just a photograph of the 920 building, which most people I think are familiar with. That is one of 3 existing buildings on the site now that are historic. They're known as the Harrower Lab, built in 1920, and the other 2 buildings at 912 East Broadway and 117 South Belmont, built about a year thereafter. The entire complex, though, is known as the Harrower Lab. And again, it's on the local register, so these are historic buildings. The KFA, again, was asked to do a fit plan to see how many units we can get at 920 East Broadway, keeping the 3 existing historic buildings. The buildings are pretty narrow, particularly 117 South Belmont. So it was actually pretty challenging. There was really no way to produce units large enough for families. So what we were left with was primarily studios and 1-bedrooms. And because of that, we thought a senior project would really be suitable for 920 East Broadway. So the unit mix that KFA came up with was a total of 13 studios and 25 1-bedrooms. But that unit count also includes 12 units in a newly constructed building. And I think you can see on the south side of the campus what's identified as Building D. What we're looking at is potentially adding a building to the historic campus that would have a basement similar to 117 South Belmont, and then go up 2 stories so that it doesn't exceed the height of the existing buildings, and that it fits into that campus well. That gets us an additional 12 units. From an affordable housing perspective and trying to get the production up, it's obvious why we would want to add that additional building and get 12 more affordable units. But we also kind of talking to planning and looking at the site and speaking with the architect, it really does kind of serve to close in that open space in between the 3 buildings. It really kind of closes in that campus, and so we think that it's really a benefit to that. So we really like, on at a staff level, we really like the idea of that new construction added to the property. So again, we want to bring this one to, let me talk about the floor plans. I apologize. We didn't have a chance to talk about that before. As I'd mentioned, 117 South Belmont does have an existing basement. Much of that basement probably couldn't be used for residential, but we do think we can get 2 units down in the basement, and then the rest of that space in the basement now would be auxiliary space. And then with a new construction building of 12 units, 4 of those units could be positioned similar to the existing units in 117 South Belmont, or where the existing units would go. And then this shows floors 1 and 2. These buildings are only 2 stories tall. And this shows the kind of the layout of how the units would look on both floors 1 and 2. There is a single two-bedroom unit that would be proposed. That would be for the manager. If you recall, we allowed Tobin World to operate on site to the end of the calendar year. But 912 East Broadway, which is the small building you see on the west, they still lease that property from us. So they're on a month-to-month lease there. The school's namesake, Tobin, actually resides in the building, and his caretaker also resides in the building, again on a month-to-month lease as well. The proposal is to convert Tobin's unit and the unit below it, where the caretaker lives now, convert that into a 2-bedroom manager's unit. So the rest of the units would be studios and 1-bedrooms, with the exception of that one 2-bedroom unit. And we wanted to show you another bird's eye view, only this time from the east, looking west, and from the north, showing the existing buildings at 920 East Broadway, and potentially the additional 12-unit building on the south end of that campus, which again we think really kind of closes off that campus, and then also show it in relationship to what we envision for 900 East Broadway, that 80-unit apartment, brand new construction family apartment project. So staff recommendations for 912, 920 East Broadway is to go ahead and issue the request for qualifications. We know enough about the site in terms of the buildings, they exist, they are not going anywhere. We're simply doing an adaptive reuse and historic preservation of those buildings, although we do want to add 1 building. So we want to bring this through to entitlements as well. So we think our RFQ is more appropriate. There are still questions on the site. It's not completely understood what all the sources and uses, as an example, might be for the project. If in fact we can get it on the Federal Register, we are open to the federal 20% rehab tax credits. There is potential for state historic tax credits. It's a brand new program that hasn't really even been adopted yet. We're seeing that that's potentially something that we could pursue after January of next year. So the project could be financed in part by the Housing Authority's contribution in terms of land, additional dollars, and in these federal and state rehab tax credits. It may also be financed with 4% affordable housing tax credits, not to go after the 9% and compete against ourselves. So we don't know fully what the sources and uses are going to be for the project, but we know enough about the project to say we are going to issue an RFQ. This is really what we're looking at doing. And then you developers tell us how you would approach that. What sources and uses would you use? What is your pro forma? Things of those sort that we can then use to identify. And of course, on 920 East Broadway, we're looking at an adaptive reuse. We're looking at historic preservation. So in our selection, in our evaluation, our recommendation to the Housing Authority in terms of which developer to choose, a paramount importance will be that we choose a developer that has a lot of experience in adaptive reuse and in historic preservation. And really, that's it for our presentation on the RFQ issuances for both 900 and 920 East Broadway. And again, I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fortney. First of all, I want to thank you and staff for going that extra yard and as far as the historic preservation of this property. I think that's very important and will serve us well in the future. So if I can just, if we get 88 units in 900 and 39 in 920, that gives us approximately 127 units on this property. Or more, could we get more? If a developer comes in with the,
In this particular case, we are requesting the RFQs and we are looking to entitle it. So unless we went through the entitlement process over again, or unless we put a pause on issuance of the RFQ now, no, we could not get more than 88 units, maybe 90. I mean, without changing that scope of that 900 East Broadway. And frankly, I don't think you can squeeze more units out of 920, given the fact that they're existing buildings, so.
we're probably at max at 920, right? At 39? We can't go any higher in the back because we have to abide by the historical rule of thumb, which is that new additions have to barely be visible from the front side of the building, the historic building.
Right, that's right. Everything we did in the preliminary concepts for 920 was in respect to the historical properties on the site. We do not believe you can get more than 39 units on 920.
All right, comments from so what we're looking for today is a request for qualifications for both properties. So do I have comments, questions from my colleagues?
Madam Chair, also, just to let you know, you do have one caller who's waiting to address the Housing Authority.
Well, let's hear from the caller before we get council questions and comments. Thank you.
Steve, you're on the line. Steve?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, you're live. Steve, you're live. Go ahead.
Tell him to turn off.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Devine, members of the Housing Authority, and city staff. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Hunt, and I'm president of the Glendale Historical Society. TGHS is enthusiastic about the city's purchase of the National Register eligible Harrower Lab and the plans to adaptively reuse it as affordable housing. We were surprised that the Historic Preservation Commission and other organizations such as TGHS were not contacted for feedback on this project. Deferring input from HPC and the community until after developers have made their proposals is more likely to result in objections that may squander valuable time down the line. We question the wisdom of issuing RFQs with only a concept of a concept. It seems that a concept should be fully developed before soliciting proposals for how to bring it to fruition, especially so when the project involves one of Glendale's most important historic commercial properties. In addition, the National Register nomination must reveal the proposed project plans in full. The plans cannot be merely conceptual, or the nomination and thus the tax credits will be delayed. What happens if the keeper of the National Register finds that the Harrower Lab property would lose eligibility for the National Register as a result of the proposed additions and modifications? Would appropriate alternatives to the project be considered? Given the enormous increase in density proposed for 900 East Broadway, as well as 515 Pioneer, TGS would prefer the city not to add additional units on the historic property. South Glendale has an infamous dearth of open green space, and the site could offer a wonderful amenity for both Broadway projects. The rendering of the building at 900 Broadway does not seem to do credit to the historic resource next door or the neighborhood. Of course, the concept is unfinished, but it would seem that neighbors would have a view of a 50-foot wall to look at, too. To To allow more variation and larger setbacks, would the city possibly consider shrinking the 3-bedroom to 2-bedroom units, which at 850 square feet are still larger than many 2-bedroom houses in Glendale? Finally, we would be grateful if you would instruct staff to attend to the creeping fig growing all over the historic brick Terror Lab building. This plant is damaging and should be removed without waiting for other construction work to begin. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Can you address some of those questions? Or Yasmin, yours?
Yeah, I absolutely. I'd love to be able to address some of those. Starting maybe in reverse. The ivy that's growing on the buildings. We understand that is an issue, and that is damaging the buildings. We don't want to see that, so that is something that we don't want to wait through this process if to remove those. And that's a discussion we've had with both ARG and KFA, and as well as J. Platt. So that's something that we can address pretty quickly. Some of the other things that I had heard, I did hear an objection to adding the additional units on the historic campus. If that were in any way to prevent us from financing the entire project, if that were to prevent us from, say, not being eligible for historic tax credits, federal historic tax credits, then that is absolutely something that we would have to take a look at. And if there were other sources and uses that might offset it, if we chose not to go down the path of a federal register. So clearly there is work to be done. I also heard early on that there was some concern with issuing requests for qualifications for the site now versus waiting for it to be more fully vetted. We think actually the issuance of the RFQ now is appropriate. What we're looking from the RFQ is for, by and large, and I think I stated this before, we're looking for developers that can demonstrate experience in adaptive reuse and historic preservation above all else. That being the primary things. Of course, we're going to look at income targeting, the same things that we would always look at. Issues such as, are we ultimately going to end up with a project that has a new building on it? That's going to be worked out. And if there's an addendum to the RFQ that needs to be done, if there's just information that needs to be put out, we can do that. But we want to move forward. Again, we want to get this project entitled, as well as 900 East Broadway entitled. And absolutely the conversation with the Historic Preservation Committee, those are going to take place. And I could refer probably to J. Platt or ARG or KFA if any of them would like to kind of talk a little bit more about the conversations that we've had thus far. But this will go through the normal entitlement process, which would include the Historic Preservation Board. And I don't remember if there's others I could specifically hit, but those are the ones that kind of come to mind.
Well, have we, in the past with adaptive reuse and in the case of historic structures, gone to our Historic Preservation Commission first?
So the Historic Preservation, I believe that is in place of design review. So that this project 920 would not go to design review. It would go rather to the historic group. And that is the process that we'd follow.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Jay.
Mr. Platt. Go ahead, Jay.
Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, we have for private adaptive reuse projects, we do, of course, take these things for design review to the Historic Preservation Commission. At this point, we don't have a design in place, and right now it's very conceptual, and so it seems appropriate to pull in the potential developers for the site to understand what will or will not work, and then once we have a plan that we can actually review, because HPC will be the binding design review authority for this project, so we're certainly not keeping them out of the loop, but it seems premature at this point. You know, at this point, everyone's just excited that we're going to have a great rehabilitation project at one of the city's, premier historic sites. Whether or not the new building is constructed is going to depend on whether that affects the federal tax credit, I would guess, as Mike said. But adding an addition to a property like this in no way will necessarily limit its ability to be on the National Register and certainly not to maintain its place on the Glendale Register. So at this point, we're kind of trying to maximize the number of affordable units we can get. And if we have to shrink that in the future, we would certainly do it.
Okay. And the other, Jay, if I may, Mr. Hunt mentioned the architecture on the 900 East Broadway, and that's just conceptual. That the developer, whoever receives this this project, will develop their own design. Correct?
Yes, and if KFA is the designer on the project, as Mr. Fortney suggested will be the case, they have extensive experience designing in the historic environment. They're one of the go-to firms for this kind of work. So they'll certainly be taking, the historic character and qualities of the Harrower Lab and taking that into consideration. That said, there's an alley between the buildings. There's a big courtyard within the Harrower complex. Be a lot of opportunities for open space and kind of distance between the two projects. But obviously there'll be a change in scale between them, which is typical throughout the city with historic resources or not.
Okay, thank you. I hope we've answered some of Mr. Hunt's questions and questions on this project. So now I'd like to hear from my colleagues on the project and if they agree with the RFQ for both projects. Would anyone like to go first?
Yes, Ms.
Mayor?
Devine.
Yes, Mayor?
I just want to make sure that we were talking about this units to be 500 square feet. Now, did we finish that with that? Does that going to be applied to this one, or we're going to go with old square footage for the affordable housing?
Mr. Fortney?
Is it quite clear what I'm asking?
I don't think we've discussed, I think the size of the units will be up to, if we tell them we want the most units possible, then that would dictate, would it not, Mr. Fortney, the size?
Yes, what staff would say in respect to 900 East Broadway.
No, I'm not talking about this project. I want to make sure that we were talking a little bit earlier that the units can be 500 square feet. Maybe I asked the city attorney, did we clear that issue?
Well,
Because it was written 540, 600.
I think we followed up with, we're going to have a discussion to it subsequently when we can get Mr. Kasakian's participation and have a broader discussion about that issue.
All right, so it's not going to be late when we decide for this project then?
We'll have to figure out the timing of that and when that comes back.
So at this time, Mr. Mayor, you're still, let's say a project was to come before you today, you would be bound by the requirements that are in place today, which is not the 500 square feet, as you had indicated during the DSP discussion. And so based on the feedback that we received from all council members and your interest in smaller unit sizes, especially on the affordability side.
Just affordable houses.
Right.
I'm not talking about other
And the city attorney's comment regarding the need to look into further whether it's across the board or for affordable units only, and Mr. Lanzafame's information that he provided in terms of across-the-board policy that we would receive from the city council in terms of size. That piece of it has not been decided as it stands today. We received some feedback from council. We now have to go do some work and bring that information back to city council. You will then have further discussion on that item. When you have further discussion on that item and provide us with that direction, we will then have to implement that piece of it. Depending on the timing of this project and when it comes back to the city council in terms of when the information would be brought forward from the RFQs, et cetera, we have to see what that timeline is and timing is and see if it matches up, whether it's today's standards or if there's a change in the future. We will do our best to bring that information back to the city council or the housing authority as quick as possible so that you can make that determination and provide that feedback. But at this time, I don't know exactly how that timing will work based on what you have before you today, and a determination that you'll be making in the future. But we'll do our best to bring it as quickly as possible.
Okay, because the developer would have to know the sizes of the units, wouldn't he have to have that information in order to design the number of units?
Yes, they would, and I think Mr. Fortney and Mr. Lanzafame are looking at the conceptual in terms of the breakdown of the units, and I don't know if you have any more information, Mr. Fortney, to provide on that.
And I apologize, I did not hear the question fully. Are we?
The developer needing to know, in terms of what the unit size would be for them to be able to determine what that looks like in terms of the layout of the project.
Okay, so if the direction to the architect was that we could go with smaller units, then they could relook at the fit plan on 900 East Broadway after we had the briefings. The desire to increase the unit count, but still keep the overall size of the building.
Right.
That was brought to KFA, and that's where, again, we looked at some of the one-bedrooms and those unit sizes shrinking and building studios where none exist in the fit plan today. And that's where I was saying, we had been studying 80 units for 900 East Broadway. We feel pretty confident we can achieve 88 units by reducing the size of those units and making studios versus ones. Is there the potential to add even more units if the direction of KFA was design these units even smaller, take 100 square feet off the threes, the twos? We could further direct KFA to analyze a fit plan with those smaller units and then come back to you and tell you what we think is possible.
So you could
They
do,
could
from
do
what
that
I'm
later.
hearing, Madam Chair and Mr. Mayor, based on your question is, if there is direction from the City Council, from the Housing Authority today, with the smaller units, then we could work with the architect to see, even if it's further reducing the size. Am I correct?
Yes, we could look at even further reducing the size of the units. I do want to caution, at the end of the day, we would like to entitle this project, particularly 900 East Broadway, in order to achieve the March 21 tax credit round. And so we want to entitle a project that we feel confident is financially feasible. When you increase the number of units, which is fantastic, you do increase the cost of the project. You do increase the parking requirement. You increase the number of toilets, the number of kitchens, all of these things do add a cost. We don't want to present to you a project and fully entitle a project we don't think is financially feasible. But reducing the square footages and getting some additional units beyond the 8 we think we can get, yeah, we can absolutely take a look at that. But we don't want to present anything to you we don't think at the end of the day we can finance with the 9% affordable tax credits.
No, but the developer will be happier to have more units to collect more rent.
Sure, but I'm only responding with you to say there's more involved than just unit count, right? That we have to take into consideration the cost of additional units, the cost of construction. Absolutely, you have more units, you're probably going to generate more to support a larger perm loan. All of those things, though, we're going to balance, and we're going to make sure you understand. We're not recommending anything to you. We don't want to go down the entitlement process, something we don't think is financially feasible.
Okay.
Correct, okay. And then anyone else with comments?
I would like to see if you were.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Again, we have a parcel that the city purchased, and we have an opportunity to provide housing for those in greatest need. I'm for reducing unit size, depending on what is the return on that. One of the things that I would like to see is on a property like this is, and really in any of the projects we have to think like this is land we own, so what do we get in return? And I would like to see some space incorporated into the project for one of the social services, nonprofits, to partner with, or maybe a space where various nonprofits can utilize to provide services for individuals who will be housed here. I mean, Topin World, although I wasn't too intricately familiar with the organization, I was aware of the community it served and the role it played in mental health and individuals and families who needed their services. And now they're gone. So, it would be great to see some portion of any project help individuals with developmental or mental disabilities, or perhaps some sort of space for someone that would do mental health work, social services work in that project. And it could be done on the first floor. It could break it up in terms of it not just being massive housing right there on the corner, close to the civic center in an area of some commercial activity on either side. And it would be close enough to the city. So that's something that I think I would hope maybe some of my colleagues would also consider, especially real estate being at a premium. We could make use of a space like that. And the city could partner with someone in helping the families and individuals that are eventually housed in the project. Those, in terms of, how the project is brought forth, I do understand the concerns that were raised, and, hopefully we can do these things on a better timeline so everyone can have their input. We can bring everyone together so we get everyone's buy-in and assure everyone that we're trying to preserve our historical resources while also doing what we can to provide for those in greatest need who need our immediate assistance now. Unfortunately, right now, with timing what it is, I understand that this has to move forward. I support it, but those are my thoughts. If we can have that space, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Kasakian. Who would like to go next?
I could, Madam Chairman, if I could go.
Okay.
So let's see. First, I'm excited. I wasn't part of the purchase of this. I wasn't on council then, but it was a great thing that we did, and using Measure S funds, and it's really exciting to see we're taking it to the next stage. I support what Councilmember Kasakian just said about carving out some space for service providers to nonprofits or whatever they may be to support the population that's living there. The other thing is, I'm uncomfortable with what seems to be like a cutting out of the Historic Preservation Commission Design Review Board, and the fact that we didn't do outreach to the Historic TGHS. And I understand now we're out of time, but I don't understand how we got to this point and why we were not able to do more of that outreach through the process so that we could go out with an RFQ on something that we're all comfortable with. That's my understanding of the way the RFQ works is it's pretty much baked in when we get the responses back. And with that, I don't really understand then what role HPC or DRB actually really legitimately plays in this if it's baked in. So those are my concerns. I'm with Mr. Kasakian that of course I want this to go forward. I don't want us to lose the opportunity. I'm just uncomfortable with how we got here.
Thank you. Mr. Najarian, Councilmember Najarian.
So I think we have to keep in mind here that we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by trying and design at least in this case, try and design a project and entitle a project. So this is different from the other one where we're asking them to give us proposals. This is going to be an entitled project. We're going to be looking at the qualifying applicants to see who is best suited to construct this project. I want to make sure that we don't overdo it and get to a point where we've baked in too many units that are going to make the success hang in the balance. So I very much was listening keenly to Mr. Fortney's words about, 80 units, you feel safe, but once you start going over that, there's additional costs that come into play that may knock us out of the tax credit round and may make it too expensive for a developer, for a contracting company to build. So I think we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and try and reach for too much and lose a year or maybe a year and a half in the application process. The other point is regarding Mr. Kasakian's statement. I believe the way the tax credits work now is that there has to be a social service component in the project. Maybe not has to be, but it gives them either that's in a tiebreaker round or it's something that's looked highly favorably in awarding the tax credits. So I think naturally the room and the space and the offices, whatnot, for social services, be it senior counseling, financial counseling, emotional counseling, etc., health and well-being as well, will come naturally. That's my understanding, is that that's the way the tax credit, the TCAC program is structured. As far as the historical part of it goes, I mean, it's not the best scenario for the Historical Society and those lovers of historical preservation, but I think we're going to be giving that building all due respect in the repurposing, much as the, I don't know, what was our last adaptive reuse? The Masonic Temple, perhaps, which was done. And I know staff was involved very closely with that, although that was a private project. We made sure that anything that was done really maintained the integrity and the flavor of the historical context. So I'm ready to go forward. I'm happy to go for the RFQ. Just let's not bite off more than we can chew and knock ourselves out of the round by becoming too aggressive with the number of units. This particular, this is a different situation than we just were talking about at Pioneer. That's why I said my opinions are going to be slightly divergent compared to this property.
Mayor, do you have any comments?
No, I already said what I said. Still, I want
all
to
right.
see more units as much as possible and the smaller one to accommodate more people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited about this project. I hope that we have, as I said, answered Mr. Hunt's questions and satisfied the Historical Society with the way the questions were answered. Again, I appreciate staff going to the laboratory, the ARG group, to make sure that we're treating this with respect, this Tobin World Historic property. I also want to say that I really agree with Mr. Kasakian that when it comes time, we should definitely include the developmentally disabled as a homage to Tobin World. I think we try in all of our developments, all of our affordable housing, to make accommodations and to support the developmentally disabled, and I see no reason why that can't happen in this project as well. So with that being said, I'm anxious to move forward. So I would need a motion, please, for staff or as a request for qualifications for that would be items 6B, 1, and 2. Can we take those together, Mr. Garcia?
Yes, you can.
Can I move
Thank
the
you.
item?
Yes, you can. She just asked for a motion.
I have a motion for items
Yes,
6B, 1 and 2.
I would like to move the
Second.
items 1 and 2.
Thank
think-
you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
All right, roll call, please.
Authority Member Agajanian,
Yes,
Brotman,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Barazian,
Yes.
Chair Devine.
Yes. Thank you all very much. What's the next item, please?
Next would be authority member and staff comments.
Are there any comments from staff?
Yes, Chair Devine, members of the Housing Authority, Mr. Lanzafame has an update regarding the lottery and the number of applicants that we have for the different programs that we have in place related to COVID-19 and the CARES Act, and funding that the City of Glendale, by way of the City Council, has set aside for these items, and he will provide that to you. Mr. Lanzafame.
Mr. Lanzafame, thank you.
Madam Chair, given this is the Housing Authority, I'll start with the residential grants. If you remember, we have 380 through the CARES Act, through Community Development Block Grant Funds. The council asked us to split that up into 2 rounds. We had closed the application period for the first round. We received 6,113 applications for that. If you recall, it's up to 2 months, $750 apiece, a total of $1,500. We are currently analyzing the raw data and making sure that our program, testing it with the program, and we will be conducting, as soon as we're satisfied that it's ready to go, we don't want to have any mistakes on it, we'll conduct that lottery. We'll then analyze again, we'll test and make sure that it's valid, and then we'll post numbers. We anticipate that either end of this week, beginning of next week.
And Mr. Lanzafame, can I ask one question? That funding goes directly to the landlord, correct?
That funding goes directly to the landlord, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good.
On the commercial side, I will tell you, we had 984. This is for 2, the CDBG grants, about 120 that we could fund with that. They're $5,000 grants. We received 234 applications for that. We received 750 for the Measure S grant fund. Again, we're analyzing that data, making sure that the program is right, and then we will be doing that. We know that there's going to be some attrition, so the numbers appear about right. We may be able to fund a majority of on the business side. Certainly on the housing side, there is a great need.
Thank you.
Susan,
Is that,
I
is
have,
that it? Go ahead, Mr. Mayor? Mr.
Yes,
Agajanian?
could you repeat the numbers? You said for the commercial, you had 984 application,
984.
and we had it 100, it was in 2,
We had 2 programs.
right,
The CDBG program was for businesses that employed at least 51% employees of low or moderate income.
all right,
That program, we have funding for 120 grants.
yes,
We received 234 applications.
right. And then for the,
For the Measure S grant, also $5,000. We had 310 funding for 310 grants. We received 750 applications.
all right, thank you.
So it looks like with the commercial, about 50% of the applicants will be receiving something. Thank you, Mr. Lanzafame. Are there any other comments? With that, what's next, please?
Adjournment.
I have a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn, I do.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned at 5.